Hi, it's Ray Grant. It's Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. It is 9:50 p.m. here in Pittsburgh. And this tonight, I will be talking about the Donna Lass. And there are, needless to say, many angles to this episode, and it'll be interesting. I will be watching along with you because I don't plan any of my videos. I just turn the laptop on and look at my book, and I take it from there. So let's start with. I'm going to start with what I say in my book. This is chapter 9, which is called State Line, and I will read until I find something to commentate on, and then I will continue. So let's get going. Chapter 9, State Line. Many adults have chosen to sidestep their own lives and run off for their own reasons, and many young women have been abducted by persons unknown and never heard from again. Both types of event happen all the time. What sets the disappearance of Donna Lass apart from those other cases is a pair of phone calls and a cryptic card from the Zodiac. Here's how the crime is described on Wikipedia. On March 22nd, 1971, a postcard to the Chronicle addressed to Paul Averly and believed to be from the Zodiac appeared to claim responsibility for the disappearance of Donna Lass on September 6, 1970. Made from a collage of advertisements and magazine lettering, it featured a scene from an advertisement for Forest Pines condominiums and the text Sierra Club. Sought victim 12, peeked through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around in the snow. I should have done air quotes for all of those. Sierra Club, sought victim 12, peeked through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around in the snow. Zodiac's cross circle symbol was in both the place of the usual return address and the lower right section of the front face of the postcard. Lass was a nurse at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. She worked until about 2 a.m. on September 6, 1970, treating her last patient at 1:40 a.m. Later that same day, both Lass's employer and her landlord received phone calls from an unknown male falsely claiming Lass had left town due to a family emergency. Lass was never found. What appeared to be a gravesite was discovered near the Claire Tappan Lounge in Northern California on Sierra Club property, but an excavation yielded only a pair of sunglasses. No evidence has been uncovered to connect the last disappearance with the Zodiac killer definitively. Okay, that's the Wikipedia article. I don't necessarily endorse everything that was said on that. Okay, we will continue with my own text. On Sunday, September 6, 1970, registered nurse Donna Lass, 25, who had worked at Letterman General Hospital in San Francisco during the Bay Area murders in 1969, was working in the medical unit at the Sahara Tahoe Casino and Hotel in State Line, Nevada. Sometime before 2 a.m., apparently while making an entry in her logbook, which trailed off on the page, she vanished without a trace. At the time, no one was aware of the disappearance since Donna worked alone in a small first aid station in a back hallway. There was no outcry and no sign of foul play. This section is called South Lake Tahoe. After working as a hospital staff nurse in San Francisco, Donna Lass decided to take a job in a medical unit at a casino in State Line, Nevada. One assumes that the attraction of the Lake Tahoe area, Donna loved the outdoors and loved to ski, and the prospect of being her own boss on her own shift, which was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., appealed to her. She took the job on June 6, 1970, and lived with a couple, Larry and Ann Lowe, at 4054 Highway 50, from June 11th until finally renting an apartment at 3893 Pioneer Trail on September 1st. She did not move into number 6 at the Monteverdi Apartments until Friday, September 4th, and only spent the early morning of the 5th actually sleeping in the apartment. She drove her Camaro from the Sahara Tahoe to number 6 that Saturday morning circa 2 a.m., presumably right after her shift was over. Donna Lass lived in South Lake Tahoe, California, and worked in State Line, Nevada. Her life in geographical terms straddled the California-Nevada border. Though Donna's residence was in California and the casino was in Nevada, her apartment and the nurse's station were only a few blocks apart, just across a dotted state line on the map from each other. I don't know if you can see that, but that's an illustration from my book, which basically shows, I believe let me see here. USGS Quadrangle Section, South Lake Tahoe, State Line, California, and State Line, Nevada. It's actually South Lake Tahoe, California, State Line, Nevada. Everything above the line, I believe, is everything above the line is Nevada. Everything below the line is California. I don't know how visible that is, but you can always buy my book and see it. Okay. Okay, now everything has come to a stop. There we go. Okay. The Donna Lass murder is the signature crime of the Zodiacs, in the sense it was the murder claimed in their very last letter during the Bay Area proper period. The 4 letters sent in 1974 were all pseudonymous, which is to say they were all sent under they were apparently sent anonymously. They were sent under in some cases fake names. The Donna Lass murder was also a crime predicted in Riverside by a cryptic clue left at the crime scene. Okay, next section is called abduction scenarios. The exact nature of the last abduction is unknown. It has been assumed by Donna's family that she was kidnapped out of her office at the Sahara Hotel, since a friend of hers, Joanne G., had arrived at the, I think Joanne's last name is Getche, but it's something like Goettsche, something like that, had arrived at the casino, was waiting for Donna to meet her at the blackjack tables. That also is in dispute. Because she anticipated being driven from the casino by her friend that morning, Donna had walked to work the previous afternoon, getting her nurse's shoes slightly muddy on the bottom from a rainstorm en route. When Donna did not appear after her friend arrived slightly late, Joanne went with somebody from the Sahara Tahoe to the first aid station, where the door was found to have been locked from the outside. It was therefore assumed that Donna had left under her own recognizance. Joanne G., not sure what was going on, then stayed at a nearby hotel for the night, and when Donna didn't turn up the next day, returned home. We know Donna had already changed into street clothes, a blue outfit, because her nurse's uniform was found in a bag with her shoes inside the first aid station weeks later. Apparently, Donna was waiting to leave the room just before 2 a.m. when something unusual happened. It is difficult to imagine that Donna would have been assaulted in the first aid station. It's true that her pen trailed off on the page while making her final entry, but that could have been a result of being interrupted by someone appearing in the doorway suddenly. A much more logical scenario would have someone coming to the room and saying that a family member or friend was having difficulty out in the parking lot behind the casino. That would also explain Donna locking the door behind her, since her nurse's uniform was still inside, and hurrying out back with the person who had requested assistance. This would have occurred right around her 2 a.m. quitting time, but Donna was notoriously conscientious and would have taken any medical emergency as her first priority. Since Donna was in street clothes, her departure would not have been noticed by people in the hallway or parking lot, and once she got to where the car was, abducting her would have been a simple matter. We already know that 4 people were involved in murders committed by the Zodiacs, 3 men and a woman. Not sure about that one, but okay. So let's say the woman comes to the first aid station and, feigning nervousness, sits down at the chair beside Donna's desk. Donna is finishing up her notes in the logbook, and when she sees the woman come in, immediately jots C//O, nurse shorthand for complains of, and looks up expectantly at the woman. The woman starts to explain that her male friend, an older man, is having chest pains and couldn't make it to the first aid station. Donna, alarmed, jumps up, her pen slipping out of her hand and making a trailing mark off the page, and tells the woman to lead her out to where the car is. Knowing that her nurse outfit and an unfinished letter are still in the room, Donna quickly locks the door behind her and follows the woman into a dark area of the rear parking lot. When she gets to the car, the supposedly stricken individual is laying across the back seat. Donna leans in to look at him, at which point a second male glances quickly around and shoves Donna all the way into the back seat, covers her with his own body, and puts the barrel of the gun against her temple. Meanwhile, the woman gets in behind the wheel, pulls out of the lot, and speeds off to parts unknown. The method of abduction is not a major mystery. The reason for the abduction is. Okay, the next section is called phone calls. The phone calls made in the wake of the Donna Lass disappearance were not folklore. However, the description of them as commonly presented, for instance, in that Wikipedia entry, does not appear to be entirely accurate. A private investigator hired by the Lass family had an informal sit-down with the South Lake Tahoe Police Department in early October 1970. I will summarize the information given by the investigator below and make it as sequential as possible. Thanks is owed once again to intrepid Zodiac researcher Howard Davis for his stellar detective work. As always, Howard. The Zodiacs called the Douglas County Sheriff's Office to report that Donna Lass could not return to work because of an illness in the family. This would presumably have happened within hours of the abduction. Note that this was a male voice making a call to a police agency shortly after the Zodiacs committed a crime. Nothing new about that. On the other hand, the call did not take credit for a crime committed. Instead, the call was a misdirection which might delay recognition that a crime had been committed, since it suggested there was a legitimate reason for Donna's absence. Remember what I speculated about Presidio Heights? That there may not have been a phone call to police taking credit for the crime, because the Zodiacs called police immediately after the shooting to report that a black man committed the Cabby murder. In other words, they did make a call to police, but instead of taking credit for a crime, it was a misdirection. Now comes a call after the Donna Lass abduction. Instead of claiming her murder, it misdirects the Douglas County Sheriff's Office by saying there's been an illness in Donna's family, and she won't be returning to work at the casino. So no one in the immediate area knows that anything terrible has happened, and it isn't until Donna's family shows up that police begin to stir. 2. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office called the South Lake Tahoe Police Department with the information about Donna Lass. It seems likely that the DCSO did some sort of perfunctory check on Donna Lass in the wake of the bizarre phone call, determined from her DMV records that she did not live in Nevada after all, but instead lived in South Lake Tahoe, and then decided to contact SLTPD just to relay the information that they had received. 3. The security desk at the Sahara Tahoe Casino received a phone call from a man identifying himself as Mr. Davis, the property manager at Donna's apartment complex. The caller said Donna had to leave South Lake Tahoe because of an illness in her family. A note was then left to this effect at the reception desk. A man named Nick Davis was property manager at Donna Lass's apartment complex. By the way, there are a lot of Davises in the Zodiac investigation as well. A man named Nick Davis was property manager at Donna Lass's apartment complex, but Nick Davis could not logically have called the Sahara Tahoe about Donna Lass, since he was not notified by either DCSO or SLTPD, the two police agencies, about the alleged illness in her family. Donna's Camaro was parked in a space in the apartment complex parking lot. Her apartment was in good order, with the light left on in the bathroom, the sole sign of disarray. Donna had only stayed at her apartment for one day, and Nick Davis would not have been familiar with her habits. Since it was early in the month, her rent and security deposit would have been paid. Her mail would not have backed up in the space of a few days, since only first and second class mail is forwarded by the post office after a move. I should know that. It's clear the local police agencies eventually questioned the authenticity of this phone call, since the man who took the message, a security guard named Gordon Petrovich, was later asked by police if he had recognized the voice. He was also asked if the call sounded like a long-distance connection. In 1970, long-distance calls were made over landlines and tended to sound distinctly different from local calls, with the voice being less loud and distinct. Although the Monteverdi apartments were in South Lake Tahoe, California, and the Sahara Tahoe was in State Line, Nevada, the two complexes were in reality only a few blocks apart, and any connection between the two would have been treated by the phone company as a local call, because they were made all the time. So for a connection to sound like a long-distance call, it would have had to originate many miles outside the area. To reiterate, the call made to the security desk early in the week from a Mr. Davis could not have been made by Nick Davis. Therefore, the call was a ruse and likely made by the same entity who abducted Donna and called DCSO, the Zodiacs. Okay, this next section is based upon research that I did talking with the family of John Paul Schott. There are two John Paul Schotts involved in the Donna Lass investigation, and I'll see how much of that I actually explained in the book. I don't remember, but we're about to find out here. Dr. Paul Schott, that's the section name. On Friday, September 11th, 1970, Dr. Paul Schott, the physician contracted by the Sahara Tahoe to oversee their first aid unit, was doing his once-a-week inspection of the room. He got the note left by Gordon Petrovich at the security desk. He then called Nick Davis at the Monteverdi apartments, thinking he was simply returning Davis's call from earlier in the week to find out what he knew about Donna Lass. When he realized that Davis hadn't called the Sahara Tahoe, Dr. Schott decided to call South Lake Tahoe Police Department and suggest they look into the whereabouts of Donna Lass. John Paul Schott, who went by Paul, was an MD who had moved to the Lake Tahoe area from San Jose. He was born on January 2nd, 1923, and died on January 10th, 1995. He is not known to have worked at the only hospital in the area, Barton Memorial in South Lake Tahoe, but he apparently had a medical office in State Line. In September 1970, he would have been 47 years old. It's probable that the hiring of Donna Lass in June would have required his approval. Dr. Paul Schott, with a note about the call earlier in the week still in his hand, and having checked the nurse's station and found the logbook slightly out of order, is puzzled that Donna Lass would depart immediately. That's a typo there, depart. Is puzzled that Donna Lass would depart immediately and so permanently and so abruptly, leaving one of her uniforms and her slightly muddy shoes in a bag without telling anyone. So he decides to call the property manager at her address, the Monteverdi Apartments, and find out if he has any further information, hence his call to Nick Davis. And when he talks to Davis, the property manager insists that he hadn't called the Sahara Tahoe about Donna and is unaware that she is missing. At this point, Dr. Paul Schott knew that a message had been left by someone who identified himself as Mr. Davis, the property manager at her residence, but who was obviously an imposter. Aware of Donna's normally high level of professionalism, Schott decides to notify SLTPD. That no official action was taken at first was a combination of police protocol with regard to absent adults and the lack of evidence of foul play. Dr. Paul Schott, on his next scheduled visit to the medical unit on September 18th at 1:30 p.m., a week after calling Nick Davis in the SLTPD, noticed that nothing had changed. Donna had not returned and no one had left any messages pertaining to her disappearance. Oops. Dr. Paul Schott, then took it upon himself to call Donna's emergency contact number, her sister Mary Pilker in South Dakota. The family, which had not heard from Donna in 2 weeks, then traveled to South Lake Tahoe that weekend and spoke with both DCSO and SLTPD. Okay, the next section is called Official Follow-Up. There were 2 mystery calls in the aftermath of the Donna Lass disappearance on Sunday, September 6, 1970. Number 1, the call to DCSO from an unidentified male saying she'd not return. And 2, the call to the Sahara Tahoe with the caller claiming to be Nick Davis. As we've seen, odd phone calls, particularly to police agencies with jurisdiction in the particular crimes, are consistent with the method of operation of the Zodiacs. Could the Zodiacs have known who Nick Davis was so that they'd use his name while making the call to the Sahara Tahoe? If Donna's abductors had singled her out in advance, as seems certain, it would not have taken much reconnaissance to find out who the property manager at her residence was. So yes, it's conceivable the unknown male could have called the Sahara Tahoe and posed as property manager Nick Davis to literally leave a calling card and to slow down recognition of what had actually happened to Donna Lass. In any case, police did not take the disappearance seriously until the Zodiac sent the Lake Tahoe card or the Sierra Club card of March 22nd, 1971. And that's the card, but you've all seen that. And you can see it on Tom Voigt's website. The card featured a drawing of a Lake Tahoe condominium, an ad for which appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle 2 days earlier. The card included a punched hole, which, as Captain Roy Conway of Vallejo PD told me in 1991, was assumed to be the burial position of Donna Lass. It's that hole up in the upper right-hand portion of the card. Police agencies spent weeks trying to locate the position of the hole in real space, but failed to find anything. Sherwood Morrill, the handwriting expert who examined all the letters, said the script on the address side of the card was consistent with the Zodiac writing on other letters. Additionally, the card featured a Lincoln stamp, which none of the Bay Area Zodiac letters was posted with. Donna Lass's new residence, the Monteverde Apartments, was at 3893 Pioneer Trail, which was also called Lincoln Highway. It's as if he knew who she was and where she lived. Police agencies associated with the case ultimately considered the last disappearance a murder likely committed by the Zodiac. SLTPD Chief Ray Laritzen, who spoke with this reporter shortly before his death, told me, I hope I'm not a jinx, told me he took the Zodiac link very seriously since there was no reason to think Donna had left on her own or was abducted by anyone else. My talk with Ray Laritzen would have been, I guess like circa 1990, maybe in 91. Offhand, I don't remember when he died, but he died in the early 90s. This section is called Conclusions. Several suppositions can be made about the last disappearance. Donna Lass was chosen in advance. There was nothing significant about the venue since the Zodiac. There was something significant about the venue since the Zodiac had never strayed so far from the Bay Area before, except in Riverside. 3. The crime itself was brazen. The abduction of a nurse from a casino on the Labor Day weekend, when thousands of patrons would have been milling around the Sahara Tahoe. Of all the murders committed by the Zodiacs, this one had the most potential witnesses. And yet no one saw anything. And again, part of the reason for that is she wasn't wearing her nurse's uniform. The letters in the wake of the disappearance were suggestive. Donna was abducted on September 6th. On October 5th, the Zodiac sent the whole card. On October 27th, he sent a card with a skeleton on the front and a skeleton inside. If you're going to bury someone, first you dig a hole, and then you place the victim, his corpse actually, in it. If the FBI was paying attention, which it wasn't, the Zodiac had now crossed the state line from California into Nevada, and even committed a crime in a place called State Line. The next abduction murder would happen not just in a different state, but in a different part of the country. Okay, I'm surprised that's all I said about that's all I said about the murder event itself. Here's the question. Well, there's several questions involved in here. The first question is, why did the Zodiacs target Donna Lass? I've already said that the Zodiacs chose victims who were either virgins or could be associated with virginity, since virginity was prized in pagan societies, and virginity was a requirement for a sacrifice victim if that victim was going to be an actual human being. So these are the connections that lead up to Donna Lass, basically, in those terms. This is reiterating this, but that name is pronounced Sherry, but Cherry Bates. Okay, it could be said that she was Cherry, and she may very well have been a virgin. The two Lake Herman Road victims were not only virgins, as I said. I don't think that they ever hugged and kissed anybody, either one of them. And they certainly didn't do that to each other, or David wouldn't have the ring when he was DOA. Darlene Farron had just come back from a vacation in the Virgin Islands. She lived on Virginia Avenue. Seventh-day Adventists are religious conservatives. My guess is Cecilia Shepard was virginal. It's not my business, mind you, but as it pertains to this line of thought, that's the assumption I'm making. Paul Stein would never have been killed at Washington Maple. As soon as he drove that block to Cherry Street, he was murdered, because then he became a associated with virginity. The toddler, Shelley Holmbo, was not only a virginal, but a little girl would have been the typical pagan sacrifice victim. Robert Salem, the Salem witch trials were, most of the victims were young girls. The accusees were probably teenagers. And Donna Lass, the word lass is that's a word that is often applied in pagan societies in places like, for example, Scotland, where that's where the events of the Wicker Man take place. A young lass, okay, would have been the typical pagan sacrifice victim. So you have the concept of virginity. You also have, with Donna Lass, in Riverside, you had the Timex watch, which was stopped at 12:22. In the watch dropped and left by Sherry Bates's body was stopped at 12:22. According to Gareth Penn, the actual watch appears to read 12:23. I'm assuming that's from jostling of the watch. The California-Nevada border, besides being a physical representation of pi, third letter C, 14th letter N, so it's 3.14. South Lake Tahoe is where the apex is of the border between California and Nevada. It represents a clock time of 12:22. Now again, the hour hand would not be pointing straight up. It would be pointing 11 degrees to the right. This is actually, in real life, it's a 131-degree angle, which would convert to 12:21:50, not 12:22. However, allowing for those two quibbles, the California-Nevada border, which Joan Webster straddled, her life straddled that borderline. She lived on one side of it, she worked on the other side. May be said to be a physical manifestation of a clock time that reads 12:22. And we will again see this idea in Greater Boston with the terminus triangle. The MIT Tower in Cambridge, Benchmark 12, which was the original burial place for Joan Webster in Chinatown, and the Liberty Mutual building in downtown Boston will represent a triangle. All benchmarks, all USGS benchmarks. Benchmark 13, benchmark 12, benchmark 9 on the map, actually benchmark 3 when it was re-leveled in 1966. It represents a triangle with the angle values 12, 22, 146. Okay, so again, we have 1222 in Riverside, 1222 with the Donna Lass abduction and murder, 1222 in Greater Boston with the Terminus event. Okay, that's the sequence. Let's see, is that it? Oh, here's the question. Once they abducted Donna Lass, what were they going to do about it? Okay, they abduct her and murder, so the place of her abduction is significant, okay? But the place where what they did with her body is also significant. If you go back and look at what was done with the Zodiac victims, we will remember that most of the Zodiac victims were abducted. Sherry Bates was abducted. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were abducted. Darlene Ferrin was not abducted, but she was chased into the parking lot, and then she was given a chance to leave, and she didn't. The two Seventh-day Adventists, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, technically were not abducted because they weren't moved anywhere. They weren't moved to a secondary crime scene, okay? But they were abducted in the sense that they were taken possession of where they were and tied up. They were immobilized, okay? Once they were immobilized, they weren't moved anywhere, but they were immobilized, okay? Paul Stein, as I said, went willingly because that's what he did for a living. He went willingly with his abductor or abductors because he was a cabbie, and cabbies are abductees for hire. If I get an Uber, if I go out and get an Uber, as I am wont to do a couple times a week, the Uber driver will be participating in his own abduction. I will be taking him from one place to another. Of course, I'll be giving him money to do that. So, but he will go willingly, presumably. Of course, if he knew I was crazy, he might not do that. Okay, but anyway, so Paul Stein, in a sense, was a willing victim. Shelley Holmbo was, her parents were apparently willing to let her play out in the backyard. In that sense, they were giving permission the way the parents of sacrifice victims in pagan society would give their permission. Robert Salem presumably let his murderers into his studio. Donna Lass went with, I'm assuming it was Berta Margulies who came into the office, said, my husband is out in the car and he's having chest pains, and Donna, being a good nurse, went running out, locked the door behind her and went running out to the parking lot, probably to the back of a dark parking lot, and was abducted there. So you had the sequence of the virginal sequence, plus you had the abductions of so Donna fit all of that. She was also, and we will see that Joan Webster essentially does the same thing, but I just demonstrated the sequence from the Riverside 1222 through the 1222 of the California-Nevada border to the 1222 in Greater Boston. I'm going to talk about the okay. So what the purpose of abduction is to locate your victim. Usually, a serial killer like Ted Bundy is abducting a victim so that he can take her to a secondary crime scene. I talked about this before. It's the idea that if I'm abducting a victim out in the open, then and she goes willingly with him, which apparently a lot of his victims did. In the case of Kathy Parks, I'm sorry to keep mentioning her as a victim, but she's a maybe the outstanding example of this. She goes willingly with Ted Bundy, whom she just met, and so did Janice Ott. Perhaps also Denise Naslund, the same thing. And they go in Bundy's car, and so did, for that matter, Carol DeRanche, who ended up resulting in the aggravated kidnapping charge against Bundy. But the idea being that all of these victims were being abducted so that they basically went from, let me use this here. They went from this point in space to this point in space. Primary crime scene, secondary crime scene, okay? Primary crime scene where the serial killer has a chance to be discovered. Ted Bundy would be out in an alley somewhere, he would be on some dimly lit street. Or in the case of the victim named Campbell was in, I think, at a ski resort, okay? Taking that victim to a secondary crime scene, usually, in Bundy's case, in the woods, where he was unlikely to be interrupted, and can basically, at that point, could do whatever he wanted to do to the victim. In the case of the Zodiacs, they were doing something different from that. They were taking the victims in the case of Sherry Bates, they were basically, let me see here. All right, we'll use this. They were taking the victims to either to a secondary crime scene, or not really a secondary crime scene, but a set of USGS coordinates. So with the case of Sherry Bates, the coordinates were 11723 and 3358. So the idea is, even though she was very close to that space anyway, we're talking about the space down the alley. The idea was they wanted to make absolutely sure she didn't stray from that spot. So they abducted her and then took her there to make the point that that was the crossroads of Michael O'Hara's life. With at LHR, and at BRSP, the secondary crime scene was the north leg of the Mount Diablo Radian. At Lake Berryessa, the significance of the spot Lake Berryessa is demonstrated by Mike Butterfield. So I will give I don't know if Butterfield discovered that on his own. I doubt it, but he can correct me if he wants publicly. But it was the points on the circle in the Zodiac letter, one of which, when extended, goes to the spot at Lake Berryessa where the couple was accosted. Paul Stein, and what the exact significance of the Lake Berryessa site was in the overall geometric manifestation of the Zodiac crimes. I'm actually not sure about. It does fit in with the X on the circle. So whether it means anything beyond that, I guess I'll find out if the Zodiacs reveal their detailed plans after if they leave that behind. If they don't, it stays a mystery. Paul Stein is the south leg. Paul Stein is murdered at Washington Cherry Street, which is actually an extension of the south leg of the Mount Diablo radian, which begins at VABM 3849 and goes through benchmark 54 at 739 Clay Street. Shelley Holmbo sanctifies the Mount Diablo Meridian. Her body is within a block or so of Harford Road. She lived on Peony Lane. Harford Road is also the Mount Diablo in Los Gatos, is also the Mount Diablo Meridian. Where 3849 is, which is the basis for all topographic data in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's a mountaintop, and logically, if you're going to sanctify that point, that boundary stone, if you will, it would have been strange to suddenly have the body of a toddler show up deceased in that area, which is essentially I guess it's a public park or a state park. And so instead of doing that, they chose to murder her and leave her body within a block or so of the Mount Diablo Meridian. I'm assuming that's what they were doing. And the significance of that was it was a child's body. A female child would have been the most common of sacrifice victim in pagan society. The location of Robert Salem's studio and the location of his dead body would have been a subradian 58.29 degrees off the south leg, and I was actually right. The location by checking Google Maps, the location of Robert Salem's studio apartment would have been west of BM 54. So it's a subradian beginning at BM 54 off the south leg of the Mount Diablo radian. So here's Washington Cherry Street. Here's BM 54. It's an angle 58.29 degrees, and that's where Salem's studio was. Okay, so it's an exact radian, which is a subradian off the south leg of the Mount Diablo radian. And again, it would have been to it would have been to the west of, as I originally illustrated, it would have been to the west of this point. Okay. So, in other words, all of these positions of murdered victims were done to create points on the map, which could then be conceptualized as a point which is the crossroads of Michael O'Hare's life. He is 23 when he kills Sherry Bates. He will be 46 when he commits the Terminus event. All of these murders, Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs Park, and Paul Stein are the Mount Diablo Radian. Shelley Humbo is the Mount Diablo Meridian. And Robert Salem is a subradian off the south leg of the Mount Diablo Radian. So all of those murders are locating victims to create artifacts on the map of, in this case, Riverside, in this case, in all these cases, the San Francisco Bay Area. The murder of Donna Lass is done to reiterate the 1222. As I said, it's the clock time of the California-Nevada border. But going beyond that, Donna Lass is the first victim whose body is not recovered. In point of fact, when I talked to Roy Conway back in the fall of 1991, I talked to George Bayward, the late George Bayward. But Roy Conway told me, he said, you wouldn't believe the amount of time we spent, several police agencies, I'm assuming South Lake Tahoe PD, I'm assuming Douglas County in Nevada, but also Vallejo PD and some of the Bay Area police agencies spent time in Lake Tahoe trying to locate the exact position in real space of that punched hole in the Sierra Club card. Okay, because they assumed that that's where Donna Lass was buried. In other words, this is December of 2023, and obviously I've been saying this since 1989, that Donna Lass was deliberately buried by the Zodiacs. Okay, but this is not, apparently, isn't a crazy idea. How do we know that? We know that because that's what the police were doing. The police were trying to locate the burial spot of Donna Lass, and they assumed that the punched hole, they're making this cryptographic long before, I don't even know if Dave Aranchek was alive in March of 1971. Maybe he wasn't. But the police were basically doing exactly what I'm doing, which is they were what I did. They tried to locate the final resting place, if you want to look at it that way, of Donna Lass. And essentially what you have with the police is this cryptographic idea, okay? We got this postcard in the mail from the Zodiac. We are going to assume that this punched hole in the postcard stands for the burial position of the victim in that area, which would have been, as far as we know, Donna Lass. Okay, so that's what they were looking at. And when I called the offices of Arthur D. Little back in whenever it was, 1990 or so. And I talked to the secretary in that office, and she said that she remembered Michael O'Hare working in that office during the Zodiac period. And she said, well, I particularly remember him being around when the police agencies were calling us about, remember, Arthur D. Little did work on the Forest Pines condo. It was their project, or it was a project that several agencies were involved with, several businesses, construction businesses were involved with, but they were the ones, since the Lake Tahoe Planning Commission was very strict about what could be built there. What they were very worried about development in the area, and inappropriate development in their pristine Lake Tahoe area. Of course, they had already developed the area up to that point. So I mean, but they didn't want. I guess they didn't want the area to be overly developed. Having a casino in the area was fine. A condo, who knows? But anyway, the Arthur D. Little was involved in ushering the condo project through, the permit process. Okay. So the secretary I talked to remembered Michael O'Hare working in that office during the time when the police agencies were contacting Arthur D. Little for whatever information they could get about the condo project. Okay. And information that might be helpful in finding where that punched hole was. Okay. So, one of the things that this does is it shows you that what I've been talking about all these years for the past, well, certainly since 1985, really. What Gareth was talking about to me, and what I've been talking about since certainly since late 1988, is these are all things that are not that far off the beaten path of your standard serial murder case, for the simple reason that the police agencies were following up on these leads. They had already identified the Zodiac case as being somewhat, cryptographic in nature, because the writer of the letters was sending ciphers. So they were expecting a higher end, whatever you want to call it, a higher end sort of solution to this case than you might normally get in your standard serial murder case. Obviously, the Zodiac, as far as people can tell, wasn't like a Gary Ridgway. He wasn't, some slobbering guy who was just going out and gratifying his basic urges. And there's that line in Hamlet that's given by Polonius when Polonius can't figure out what Hamlet is saying to him. When Hamlet is saying, this cloud looks like this, and so forth. And Polonius is smart enough to figure out that Hamlet is actually talking about something. He's not just babbling, okay? But he can't quite get what Hamlet is saying. So Polonius says, though this be madness, yet there is method in it, okay? That's where our modern saying of, there is method in my madness, comes from, which is, this looks like it's crazy, okay? But it's not crazy, okay? It has a basis in fact, and if you can just, come to it from the right angle, you can figure it out. It's not rocket science, okay? And by the time of the Lake Tahoe card, the police had figured out that there was something going on here which was unusual, and that would require like a different type of police work, of detective work, than you normally see in this sort of case. Okay, so I look at people like uh, like Ned's friend Jay over there on. Oh darn it! Eh. I look at people like that, and and who insist on saying, "Well, that's just crazy," As no, you're just. It isn't that I'm crazy. It's that you're lazy. Okay, it's that you're not willing to spend 5 minutes of your time. And here's the thing: if you're posting on a Zodiac Killer message board, you have all kinds of free time. Okay, there's no one on any of these. There's no one who is a current web sleuth, or in my case, an amateur investigator. I spent, what is it now, more than 38 years doing this. I can't claim that I have all kinds of demands on my time. And why? Because I'm doing this. Same thing with Ned DeHaan. Same thing with Tom Voigt. As high a quality of product that Tom gives us. Tom is state of the art. I don't know that I'm state of the art, but Tom is. Okay. When your enemies are using your material, okay, you're state of the art. Okay, you've reached a level in human society that few people can approximate. Okay, when the people who hate your guts are still using your product, okay, that should tell you all you need to know. Oops, oops. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have room to do. Maybe I do. I don't know. Okay, so by the what the police agencies in the Zodiac case have admitted that this is not your standard serial murder case. Okay, there's obviously what I've never understood about somebody like Dave Aranchek is, particularly after you see something like Z340 and you see the undertext of the ciphertext of Z340, how long are you going to continue to be a creationist when it comes to the crimes themselves? How long are you going to continue to believe that the Zodiac was this guy running amok on the landscape with a foot and a half of drool hanging out of his mouth? How long are you still going to believe that? If somebody was sophisticated enough that he had a level of understanding of the Army code manuals, and you couldn't get that unless the Army thought you were a pretty bright person, somebody like you, Penn, at what point do you stop believing that, well, this is just a conventional serial murder case, and this was just a guy who knew a little bit of cryptography? No, it wasn't. Nobody who creates something like Z340 is a dabbler. That's somebody who cares about the undertext, who cares about the, who is actually communicating with other cryptographers when he creates that sort of ciphertext. Okay, there's no other way of looking at it. I'm sorry. Okay, and if Dave can't see that, then that's on him. So, but anyway, here's what the idea was. You've reached a point where you've done something with each of the with the location of each of the bodies, with the location of each of the murders. Okay, what's the next step? Okay, the next step looks like this. This is the Mount Diablo radian. This is what is alluded to in the Mount Diablo letter of June 26, 1970. And in the July 26th letter of 1970, where he said the Mount Diablo code concerns radians and the number of inches along the radians. Okay, so you have the Mount Diablo radian, which is 58.29 degrees, although the two locations are north of the north leg. Let's write this in here. Okay. So this angle, which goes on for hundreds of miles here. Okay. 58.29 degrees, Mount Diablo, VABM 3849. Mount Diablo baseline, Mount Diablo meridian. Lake Herman Road crime scene, the BRSP crime scene, both very slightly north of that line. The line is approximated. Again, the line from the phone booth at Springs and Tuolumne to these two this angle is not approximate, it's an exact radian. Where the Zodiac called Nancy Slover, if you connect that point to the Blue Rock Springs parking lot and gate number 10 turnout on Lake Herman Road, it's an exact radian. Okay? They had to approximate the Mount Diablo radian, the north leg of it, for reasons I've already given. Otherwise, you have the murders in fields and in the middle of highways, plus you don't have localized murder sites the way you do now, where you can say, well, Darlene Farron was murdered in the Blue Rock Springs parking lot. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were murdered in the gate number 10 turnout. You have specific points, as opposed to the middle of a field somewhere, or the middle of a highway somewhere, or down here, if you varied the south leg location, you would have the murders taking place. If you stuck to the north leg line, then down here the murder of Paul Stein would have taken place in the middle of a block somewhere. So to get specific points that could later be referred to, and one of the ways that we see that in the Zodiac case, let me, darn it, let me see what that says. Well, it's over an hour anyway. One of the ways we see that in the Zodiac case is we see it in the naming of the letters, okay? Not only do we say Riverside, and we say LHR, Lake Herman Road, I say BRSP, everybody else says BRS, Blue Rock Springs Park. LB is Lake Berryessa. PH is Presidio Heights, okay? We give a name to everything. Same thing with the letters, okay? There's the confession letter. We have what I call the loose leaf letters in Riverside. The Z408 cover letters. The debut of the Zodiac letter. The school bus threat letter of October 13th. The pen card, okay? To a large extent, each letter, the Zodiac killer sent 26 letters, and each letter has a theme, okay? And we name each of those letters, okay? So setting up the murders to do that allows for, among other things, for greater notoriety. because each of these places can then become notorious. The Lake Herman Road spot, the gate number 10 turnout, on Google Maps, you can type in Zodiac spot for Lake Herman Road. It'll take you right to it. Okay. Um, uh, this is also true of, well, it's true to a lesser extent, probably more true of the Lake Herman Road spot than any of the other spots. But Washington Cherry is an infamous intersection in Presidio Heights. It's where the Zodiac struck. Okay. Well, Jackson Street is, for that matter. Okay. So all of this was preconceived by the Zodiac killers. And what you have is you have the north leg. And again, one of the things that Gareth Penn told me was that the main theme of the main design theme of the Zodiac project was the idea of symmetry. Okay. So if you have the Mount Diablo radian, and you have here, and you have three, let's say we're talking about the dead victims. Of course, they intended to kill both victims in Blue Rock Springs Park. They weren't able to do that. You have two events on the north leg. You only have one event on the south leg, but you do have the Salem murder as a subradian. But anyway, on the north and south legs, you have two events, one event. You need another event on the south leg. You had 3 dead victims, and only one down here. So even adding a second victim wouldn't change that. Although if you add Salem in, then you have 3 dead victims down here and 3 up here. But I noticed that the Mount Diablo radian wasn't symmetrical, because there should have been one other incident on the south leg. There were 2 incidents on the north leg and only one on the south leg. So I looked at the south leg and I said, what's the most significant point on the south leg? And it's BM 54, 739 Clay Street. And we don't have the body of Donna Lass, although as Mary Pilker once told me, I was talking to Mary Pilker on the phone, Donna Lass's sister. And I said, and remember, I was asked by South Lake Tahoe Police Department, I was asked by Detective Tom Connor to call her because Mary Pilker wanted to know about amateur investigators looking into her sister's disappearance. I didn't want to do that, but Tom said, do me a favor and call her and talk to her and, send her material, send her a copy of your book and so forth. And Mary ended up sending me pictures of Donna, okay? So that was, again, I didn't look to do that, but, we ended up getting to know each other. And unfortunately, she has since passed away. But anyway, when I looked at that, I said to myself, they don't have Donna Lass's body. Donna Lass's body was not dumped anywhere. And yet they do have a point which isn't indicated anywhere. So I said Donna Lass has to be buried somewhere in proximity to BM 54. And I went through a long drawn out sequence with when I originally went to the police, when Suffolk County DA's office in Greater Boston back in 1989, and I said Joan Webster is buried at BM 12, and I tried to get them to allow me to dig up the grass lot at Neeland and I-93, and they refused to allow me access to it. And they said, well, we can't let you go in there, even if you're paying for it. We can't let you go in and dig up a lot just because you think there's a body down there. In 1989, I wasn't aware of ground penetrating radar. In late 2000, I found out about GPR machines, and I contacted Tom Connor of South Lake Tahoe Police Department. and I said, you're in charge of the Donna Lass investigation. I would like to, I believe that the body of Donna Lass is in immediate proximity to the BM 54, which is at 739 Clay Street. By the way, let me go through the oh, it's right there. Okay. This is what it looks like. If you go to Google Maps, if you have the Google Maps app on your phone, in 1970, you can see there's a storefront there which is called Dragon Seed. And let me see if that's going. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you can see that on the. It's called Dragon Seed. In 1970, that storefront was called Dragon Plaza. And let me see if I can show. The benchmark is in that wall. Now, Ricardo Gomez, who lives in the area, nice guy. As I've said, he's one of few people in the Zodiac online community who's been a community member for whatever, a quarter century or so, and he doesn't have any enemies, okay? So, but anyway, Ricardo told me, I said, I can't see the benchmark anymore. When my photographer took a picture of it when it was Dragon Plaza in 1990, you could see the benchmark disc in the wall, which is actually, I don't know if you can. I don't think you can see that, but it's right there. It's it's maybe a foot or two up from where the ground is. It's embedded in the wall. It's a bronze disc that's embedded in the wall. And I told Ricardo, I said, well, that used to be called Dragon Plaza. Now it's called Dragon Seed. And I don't see the disc in the wall. And Ricardo went by there and he said, well, the disc is still there. It's just been painted over. Okay. But it's still there. And I assume the disc is still there now. It's a USGS benchmark disc. It's benchmark 54. And as I said, in 1990 it was called Dragon Plaza. It must have been called Dragon Plaza in 1970 because the Zodiac on April 28th, 1970 sent the dragon card. And that's what the reference is. And when I get a chance, I will talk about the significance of the word dragon. But anyway, I went to Tom Connor, South Lake Tahoe PD, and I said, what I want to do is run a GPR machine in that general area and see if I can locate a body, whatever the nearest open ground is. And Tom Connor said, well, that's as good an idea as any. While I was doing that, Tom was checking on burglaries in the area right around the time of Donna's abduction. So basically, his attitude was any lead that could reasonably produce results is worth following, especially since I was going to be paying for everything. So I mean, so I contacted a geophysical company in the area, and they were actually willing to do that. In fact, they found the whole idea very interesting. The problem was SFPD wouldn't let us do it. SFPD was in the middle of doing their DNA. They had started up a lab in June of 2000, a 3-person DNA lab. And that continued through October of 2002, which is when they did the primetime live show on the Zodiac Killer and the DNA. And they were checking everybody's DNA. But the idea basically was, and Kelly Carroll, who was one of the inspectors assigned to the case, the Zodiac case, told me he didn't want the whole thing to turn into a circus. Well, all we were going to do is run a GPR machine, which looks like a lawnmower, over with a computer screen on top of it, over the area. We weren't breaking ground. I was going to pay for it. It would take maybe 20 minutes at the most over the open ground. I didn't know at the time the open ground that was the appropriate open ground that was closest to that benchmark would have been the area just to the left of the. Let me see if I can get this. Let me. Yeah, I don't think it's visible here. Let me. I'm going to go down to Kearney Street here. Is that Kearney? Yes, it is. Good. Okay. And see if I can get the. Where is Donna Lass buried, you ask? She's buried right there. She's buried in the only area, as far as I know, the Portsmouth Square Park has been renovated since 1970. The only area that is pretty much exactly the same as it was in 1970 is the area right, basically the garage doors, although obviously they have different machines there, and the grassy area just to the left of the garage doors. That's where I say Donna Lass is probably buried, although she might also be buried to the right of the garage doors, which is the reason I think the area to the left of the garage doors is more likely is because that's where the plaque about there's a plaque about the eastern terminus of the cable car system that was begun out there. And because both the words Easter and terminus are involved in the placing of the plaque, and that's what's being commemorated, I tend to think that that's where they would have placed the body. I have spoken with a friend of mine who is a anthropologist, a forensic anthropologist. And I asked her, I said, how difficult would it be to bury a body in a city area? And obviously, first of all, they would have been doing work in Chinatown. So I don't know how visible, just city workers would have been to an Asian population out there. All you would have to do is put on orange vests and walk up and dig a hole, and then bring the body around afterwards after the hole had been dug. Dump the body down and cover up the hole, and that's how you do it. And my forensic anthropologist friend said you could actually do it you could reduce the body to a fairly compact solid, kind of like a suitcase sized, and people have been stuck in suitcases during murders. But she said you could reduce the body to a fairly small unit. Dig the hole without bringing the body by. Okay, then when the coast is clear, bring the body by, dump it into the hole, cover it with dirt, and I believe that happened on October 5th, 1970. The whole card is the only Zodiac letter which is dated, which actually has a date on it, which was applied by the writer, not by SFPD or by the Chronicle. So I believe the burial itself took place October 5th, 1970. And that's where it was. It was right there. And I believe the body is there today. SFPD unfortunately had veto power. And how a circus atmosphere would have been created, I wouldn't know, because if we went in there with a GPR machine and we didn't find anything, I'm not going to report that news to anybody. I'm going to say, "Oh well, looks like I was wrong on this one," you know. So I wouldn't have made a big deal. The only way there could be a circus atmosphere is if we actually found a body. But my take on SFPD is interested in the Zodiac killer case being solved as long as they're the ones who do it. If somebody else does it, not only will they not cooperate, but they will serve as an obstacle to that sort of thing. Essentially, the geophysical company told me that while they were willing to do the GPR scan, and they were actually looking forward to doing it and were happy to do it, if SFPD objected to their doing it, they couldn't go forward with it. We weren't sure whether we would actually be breaking the law or not by just going ahead and doing a GPR scan, but I don't know how to run a GPR machine, and I've been told I have friends here in Pittsburgh who are anthropologists and who are actually experts at running GPR machines, who tell me that you have to be trained to do it, because the reading the screen is a very subtle process, and it isn't like I've seen GPR machines used on police procedural shows where you look at the screen and you can actually see a body, okay, on the screen. Nothing like that happens in real life. It's just you see like these gray things on your screen, and it looks like I think it looks like TV static. You have to know how to interpret the information, and it's significant, like where the bottom of the machine is, how much clearance it has with the ground, and so forth. I know years ago, back in 2010, Ed Neal gave me a hard time because I didn't go out to San Francisco and rent a GPR machine and run it myself over the area. Since I don't have the training to do that, maybe I should go out and get the training, and then, but that would still require me to perhaps to break the law, since SFPD vetoed any such action on our part. Anyway, that was December of 2000. So the case could conceivably, if at some point in the future a GPR scan is run in that area and we find Donna Lass's body still buried there, as I think if the Zodiac killers had dug her up, they would have dumped her in an area where she would be, where it would be noticed, and there would be press coverage of it. So that, and plus the artifacts that they created in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, and in Riverside, and in South Lake Tahoe were finished. In other words, those are finished products. So they wouldn't have any reason to dig up Donna Lass's body. They dug up Joan Webster's body because the terminus triangle was not brought. The terminus event didn't happen, so the terminus triangle was never actually created. So for that reason, there was no point in leaving Joan Webster buried at BM 12. So they came by sometime later, dug her back up again, and dumped her in Hamilton. By the way, I just thought of something. Let me see if I have. I don't know what I did with the. Oh, there it is. Okay. I just thought of this after I did my last video, which is come to think of it, that would be an interesting thing to check on. Let me see. Let's go to, all right, we'll go to, okay, Joan Webster's body was relocated in Hamilton, Massachusetts. Hamilton is about 20 minutes north of Salem, Massachusetts. Robert Salem was Robert Salem was murdered in 1970, March 29th, 1970. Salem, Massachusetts, which is 20 minutes from where the maybe is the largest town near where Joan Webster's body was not reburied, but dumped after it had originally been buried. The zip code of Salem, Massachusetts is 01970. I found that of interest. Perhaps of greater interest, however, when I read Gareth Penn's article in the Mensa Bulletin, would have been the July-August 1985 Mensa Bulletin. The article, the reason I originally started calling Gareth, and I didn't start writing letters to him for like a year or so, but I was originally calling him. His phone number, again, this is 1985, so this is not his phone number anymore. Don't try calling this number, please. Gareth's not there anymore. Anyway, his number was 415, that's San Francisco area code, 499-0670. Okay? Donna Lass was abducted and presumably murdered on 90670. Okay. Again, as I said, the last 5 digits of Garrett's phone number represent a significant date. It is the Donna Lass abduction and murder is perhaps the signature event of the Zodiac Project, because she was one of the central figures. Joan Webster is also a central figure. Well, they all are, but she was a secret victim. But it's another example of the Zodiacs hiding in plain sight, which is when you call the number, you are calling the date on which Donna Lass was abducted and murdered. So let me see where we are on time here. Oh, an hour and a half. That's not too bad. I can wait to mention this, or I can mention it I can mention it later on. Let me see what we got here. We got that. We have that. We have. Let me think here. Okay. I've already shown you the Timex 1222, California Nevada border 1222, the terminus triangle 1222 146. The if I'm right about where Donna Lass is buried, and you can check out, you can go online and check out Portsmouth Square Park. Well, I'm not going to do it right now. If I'm right about Donna Lass being buried in Portsmouth Square Park, she is buried a few feet away from a plaque, which that you can go to Portsmouth Square Park online, and they will show you it's shown in my book as well, and it's also there. You can also go on YouTube and look at, if you get Portsmouth Square Park, they will actually show you the guy named Halliday was the inventor of the cable car, at least for the San Francisco area. And the place where the place where the Portsmouth Square garage doors are, and to the left of that garage door where there is actually open ground. Okay, it's basically the only place in the entire park where there's open ground. As Tom Voigt pointed out to me back in 2010, he says, that park is pretty much covered up by concrete. I don't know where you would bury a body, but fortunately that allows only one place for the body to go, which was in the area of open ground to the left of the garage doors, although it's possibly to the right of the garage doors, since there is some open ground also there. But where the garage doors, there is a plaque above where the garage doors, and it celebrates the eastern terminus of the cable cars in San Francisco. Okay, and I believe this happened in 1842, something like that. Okay, so this would associate Donna Lass with two words which are significant to the Zodiacs: the word Easter and the word terminus. Okay? So the Zodiacs found a place on the landscape that evoked those two words: Easter, terminus. And Donna Lass was murdered, as I said, in 1970. When Joan Webster was abducted, we'll put Donna Lass 1970, Joan Webster 1981. Where was Joan Webster abducted from? She was abducted from Logan Airport, and the specific place where she was the Eastern Airlines terminal. Okay? Easter terminal or terminus. Okay? So the two buried victims, Donna Lass buried in Chinatown, in San Francisco at in Portsmouth Square Park, to the left of the garage doors. Joan Webster buried in Chinatown, in um, in Boston at Nealon Street and the juncture of I-93. Okay, are both associated with the words Easter and terminus, or terminal. The same concept. So, and those two burials were 11 years apart. Let me see here. Joan, okay. Do we see this played out in any of the Zodiac letters? Yes, we do. We see it in the Halloween card. The Halloween card was mailed October 27th, 1970. Okay? What do we see on the Halloween card? Well, on the Halloween card, and let me see if I can get this. I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but we'll give it a shot anyway. Okay, what we see on the Halloween card are, on the front of the card, we see a skeleton, which is part of the card. Okay, and it is covered up by a pumpkin, which was not originally part of the card. Inside the card is like a novelty store skeleton. I guess one of those things that hangs and actually has joints and so forth. Okay. What is the significance of that? The significance of the Halloween card is that the Zodiacs are going to bury two victims. Okay. One of the victims is Donna Lass. The other victim is Joan Webster. Okay. And by the way, people may come back and say, well, wait a minute, this is 1970. Joan Webster was born in 1956. Are you telling me that they specified Joan Webster? Well, I doubt seriously that they specified the specific victim. What they would have specified is a victim whose name fit those parameters that they were looking for. So the victim who was inside the card, the victim who's on the face of the card, is Donna Lass. By October 70, this was preceded by the whole card. She had already been dumped into a hole and buried, okay? So the Halloween card, the cover of the card shows a victim that is fixed, okay? This victim can't move. The skeleton can't move. And it's covered. I'll explain why, the reason for the pumpkin, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. On the surface of the card, that skeleton on the front can't move. The skeleton inside the card can move around. Why? She hasn't been murdered or buried yet. But they fully intend to bury that victim who became Joan Webster and who was eventually buried, was basically taken from the Eastern Airlines terminal, although she went willingly. She went very willingly, just the same way Sherry Bates did, with Michael O'Hare, and was eventually buried at Nealon and I-93. And so again, you have two victims. You have the victim on the front of the card who is fixed, and that victim has already been put in place. You have a victim inside the card who can still move around because she hasn't been abducted and murdered yet. That's Joan Webster. So it's Donna Lass and Joan Webster associated with the Halloween card. Now let's do the I demonstrated this to Dave Aranchek, and he got very sarcastic. So I don't know that I'm even going to bother here. But however, that never stopped me before. Okay. You know, the funny thing about myself and Dave Aranchek is, on the one hand, the rest of the Zodiac online community kind of holds Dave in high regard and worships Dave and thinks Dave can do no wrong. And on the one hand, I don't feel that way. On the other hand, I appreciate what Dave has actually done more than the people out there do, because I realize the actual research Dave has done, for example, by going beneath the cipher grid of the, it's like the episode 5 of Let's Crack Zodiac got what, 2 million votes? Episode 6 and episode 9, which I think hold much more significant information than episode 5, have gotten substantially fewer votes. I don't think either one has cracked 100,000. But ultimately, if all of this comes out in the wash, that's what Dave is going to become known for doing that research that underscores the things that I'm saying about the Zodiac Project. The solution to the ciphertext, with all due respect, does not matter. What the Hardens found does not matter, except in the most general sense. And the only thing that Dave found that matters is the two expressions, life is and death, for the reasons I stated. But those plus the patterns that Dave found in the undertext, those are significant. Okay. But anyway, Dave gave me a hard time, so okay, we'll do it this way. It's getting towards midnight. I just misspelled the word pumpkin, so. All right, let's do this again. The Zodiacs covered a skeleton on the cover of the card, which I say is Joan Webster, and they covered it with a pumpkin. Why? It's because pumpkin converted to Morse code and then turned into a binary number with the one for dash and 0 for dot. Gives you a total which I'm not going to go into right now because it's not that significant. The actual total isn't that significant. Here's the interesting thing. The word pumpkin and the word dragon when they're changed to binary numbers, contain the same prime number. Okay, I think dragon is 2521 times 14, and offhand I forget what pumpkin is, but both pumpkin and dragon contain changed to binary, contain the prime number 2521. And also, one of the chapters in Time 17, what led me to look at this was in one of the chapters in Time 17, Gareth Penn talks about the roots of fascism. And that struck me. It's just like the wording in the Case Reopened show, where Gareth talks about a murder as a sacrifice. Gareth talks about, at the end of one of his chapters, he was waxing philosophical. Oops. Make that 10, 00000011. And he was talking about the roots of fascism. All three of these words, when the roots of fascism, that made me think, what does he mean, roots of fascism? Let me look at fascism. I found that fascism contained 2521 as a factor. The binary form of fascism contained this number. Dragon is 2521 times 14. Pumpkin also contains 2521. Offhand, I don't know. I'm doing these videos without notes, and this is probably a time when I'm telling myself I probably should have taken notes on this. I think it's in my book somewhere though. Here's the idea. The number 2521 is it consists of the number 19, which is this, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Okay? This is binary 19. It's 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. It's 16 plus 2 plus 1. That's 19. Okay? This is the number 89 in binary. It's 64, not 32, plus 16. 64 plus 16 is 80. Plus 8, 88. Not 4, not 2, plus 1, 89. This is the prime number 2521. It consists of those two numbers shoved together. So this would be, what is it? 1024, I guess 2048, and no, it wouldn't be 512. 2048, 1024, 512, 256, 128. 64, not 32, 16, 8, not 4, not 2, plus 1 gets you 2521. I'll do the math of that after the video if it's okay with you, but I think that's correct. This consists of two numbers, as I said. It's this number, 2521 in binary consists of two numbers stuck together. This number and this number, okay? This number is 19, this number is 89. The date of the terminus event, 1989, okay? I don't think this is a coincidence. Maybe it is, I doubt it, okay? When you see the skeleton on the cover of the Halloween card, you see her covered up by a pumpkin, okay? When that pumpkin is lifted, it will be lifted in 1989. And you will understand that the pumpkin on the cover of the card is Donna Lass. And Donna Lass at that point presumably will be dug up after the terminus event happens. And Joan Webster in Chinatown in Boston will be dug up. Okay, what's the significance of? So again, the burial leads to what's going to happen after the terminus event. The two buried victims will then obviously be dug up. What is going to happen, just as with the gates in Central Park, they're left there for 16 days and then they're warehoused. They're put someplace else. The conceptual art point has been made, okay? And then society moves in and undoes the damage, if you want to look at it that way. I was just about to make another point, and I forget what it is now. The terminus event, Donna Lass would presumably be dug up, and Joan Webster would presumably be dug up in 1989. So the burial of the two victims is part of an artifact in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Joan Webster is part of is the anchor for the artifact in Greater Boston, and so that was the significance. It is also significant that the Zodiac saw that far in advance, obviously, that they were able to predict all of that in that far ahead into the future. Donna Lass was murdered and buried in 1970, so they would predict it. October, not quite 19 years into the future, is the idea. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else about Donna that I need to mention. I guess if I think about it, I had one other point to make. I don't remember what it was, but the purpose of the Halloween card is to make a reference to the two buried victims. One of whom was already buried, the other and therefore fixed in place in space, and the other one who could still move around, but who would then be used as part of another artifact. Okay, and this is an example of the long-term planning also, since pumpkin and dragon both have the same prime factor, that means that when they cover Donna Lass with a pumpkin, what they're actually saying is she is covered by dragon. In other words, dragon and pumpkin are Morse binary synonyms. And Donna will be found to be covered by Dragon Plaza. It then became Dragon Seed, although Dragon Seed has apparently gone out of business now. But the idea being that you will find the body of Donna Lass under BM54, which is where Dragon Plaza is. The disc is at the storefront for Dragon Plaza. It's BM54. It's 739 Clay Street. It's still there. Okay, and again, Donna Lass's body is still there. Okay, so that I think is I think I had, let me see. Oh, 2 hours. Wow, man. These videos just fly by, don't they? I mean, yeah. I had a guy who was I decided to leave him up, but there's that guy who was let me see. Let me see if I can find it here. Abduction and murder. Okay, it's not that one. Let's see if it's this one here. Attacked in the park. No? Let's see if it's the next one down. Oh, it's River Prawn Pottery 6137. He had some negative things to say over on Ned's channel. By the way, I haven't looked at Ned's channel since whenever the unpleasantness occurred. Was that 2 weeks ago now? Whenever it happened, I haven't looked at Ned's channel since, or maybe it was last week, but I haven't looked at his channel in I don't know what. I don't have any intention of looking at any Zodiac news reports. I don't know what's going on any more than I know what's going on Tom's board or on Reddit or anything else, because I just pay attention now to my channel. But there's a guy named River Prawn Pottery 6137, and he was commenting on my Shelley Hombo video. And he says, very interesting stuff. One criticism, editing out some of the dead air for the impatient viewers. I think the dead air is what sets my stuff apart from all the other videos you see on YouTube, which are professionally done. Like Dave's videos, for example. His are fantastic, and mine are it just shows that you can't be good at everything. You know, I'm very good at figuring out the Zodiac case. I'm not very good at this kind of stuff, you know, and I still haven't figured out my VCR remote. So, you know, I know what that says about me. Let me see what else I got here about Donna Lass. Donna was, she was abducted and murdered September 1970. I don't believe it would have been very difficult for them to do the burying of the body. Well, I guess this is worth. I'm going to mention this really quickly because I think where are we now? We're at 2:04. Okay. Maybe we'll keep it to 2:15 or so. What was I just thinking about Donna now? I can't remember. She was abducted and murdered in September of 1970. She was buried in Chinatown. That's what I was trying to remember. Ed Neal gave me a hard time about this. Okay, but I think I'm right and he's wrong about this. Why would you bury victims in Chinatown? You have two buried victims and they're both buried in Chinatown. Donna Lass is buried Portsmouth Square Park is in Chinatown, and it's the largest Chinatown in the country. In I think I mentioned this before. I love Chinatowns. I just the my favorite video of all time is the Chinatown, the unofficial Chinatown in Seoul, South Korea, which was done by a lady who was running a. Unfortunately, it's been taken down. It's my favorite video of all time. It's basically her walking through the Chinatown, the unofficial Chinatown in Seoul, and I love areas like that. It's like the Strip District here in Pittsburgh, where you go into Robert Woolley's uh, Robert Woolley's store, and they have fish out, and they've got all kinds of stuff out where you can see them, and fish floating, and live fish floating in um, tanks, and so forth. I just love that whole idea of like open markets. And I was wearing my co-op shirt a couple weeks ago. The East End Co-op here in Pittsburgh is going back to a hot bar in January. I think. At least that's what one of the candidates for the board said. So that will put a smile on my face. Anyway, um, now I have to remember what I was going to talk about again. Chinatown. Okay. Why are they burying the two victims in Chinatown? Well, here's why. I want you to imagine that this is planet Earth, okay? And we've got planet Earth. Remember the Earth's axis. The Earth doesn't rotate up and down on its axis. It is 23 degrees off at the North Pole and 23 degrees off at the South Pole. So, in a sense, planet Earth is also, the basis for our life is 223s. Life is 223s. Well, death can be 223. If you're shooting people with an M14, which has 223 rifle ammo in it. The Zodiac project had two poles, just like planet Earth. It had Berta Margulies, who was born in Poland, and it had her son Michael, who is of Polish ancestry. So there are two poles in the Zodiac project. There are two poles here. Okay, now let's assume this is the kind of point that only Ed Neal could make, in my opinion. No, Ed Neal has served as a researcher in two ways. Number one, he told me, or put in a post somewhere, that the Shelley Lynn apartments in Riverside were at 4710 Magnolia Avenue. That is worth noting because the March Air Force Base man probably lived in that building in one of those units, and I have him as doing that in my novel. When the Ray Grant character goes back in time, he sees and he can't be seen when he time travels, when he goes backward. Although he can still be killed by vehicles, so he can still die in the past, but he can't actually change anything in the past. He can only watch it happen. So the March Air Force Base man is in the alley behind 4710 Magnolia. And the only reason I know that is that Ed Neal mentioned it somewhere. Ed Neal also fulfilled the very important function of demonstrating that when you're traveling west on Lake Herman Road, and you are traveling past the gate number 10 turnout, your headlights don't shine into the turnout. Because the car goes like this and the turnout's over here, and the headlights are directed almost directly away from the turnout. And that's also the reason when you're coming up the hill, as Pierre Bideau pointed out, your headlights go directly into the turnout, because that's where the turn in the road is, okay? And that's why what Peggy Ure says in the Lake Herman Road police report is bullshit. Okay, she couldn't have seen the kids inside the car. There are so many reasons why she couldn't have seen the kids inside the car. The first is the headlights of her car would not have shown on the Rambler. That's number one. Number two, their window would have been up, or the window of their car would have been up. It was what, 22 degrees out? Didn't they have the heater on, or wouldn't they have had the heater on? Also, what I say to Zodiac hobbyists, make up your mind about the reclining seat. Was it up or down? Because if it was down, then Peggy Ure doesn't see the kids, and the Zodiac doesn't see the kids. If it was up, then everybody sees the kids. Then Robert Conley sees the kids, and James Owen sees the kids. Okay, you can't have it both ways unless you're Ray Grant and you say the front seat was reclined after the kids were dead, and it was reclined to set up people like Craigle. It was so that the Zodiacs could then work in conjunction with people like Craigle so that they could spread misinformation in the future. The Zodiacs saw ahead, saw that there would be people like Craigle, and they said, here's some red meat for you. Okay, so anyway, the idea behind Chinatown is the same idea that you get with the movie The China Syndrome. Okay, what is the idea in the China Syndrome? It's that if you get a meltdown at a nuclear plant, the meltdown goes all the way down through the planet Earth and it ends up in China. Well, Ed Neal goes and points out, he says, well, wait a minute. If both the San Francisco and Greater Boston are in the Northern Hemisphere, and China, even though it is halfway across the world, is also in the Northern Hemisphere. Therefore, the Zodiacs wouldn't have been making the point that the body was being buried in effect on the other end of the world, because it's not the other end of the world. Anything that goes downward through planet Earth is going to end up in the Southern Hemisphere. And Ed is right, okay, about that. However, we're not talking about being factually correct on a planetary basis. What we're talking about is culture. And the culture says, if you go to the other end of the world, you end up in China. Why? Because the significant thing that's on the other side of the world is China. Even though, as Ed says, if you go directly down through the Earth, you're not going to end up in China, because if you go down directly through the Earth, you're going to end up in the Southern Hemisphere. Again, Ed's right about that, but he doesn't get it, is the point, okay? So the reason to bury both Donna Lass and Joan Webster in Chinatown is to put them on the other side of the world, is to bury them as far as they can be put. It's just a kind of demonstration that we are taking these victims, away from where their lives are and putting them at a distance. Just as people say, for example, I love you to the moon and back. Okay, the moon isn't there. If you want to love somebody, love them to Alpha Centauri, because that's 4 light years from here. And the moon is only 1.3 light seconds away, okay? But that's what people say. I love you to the moon and back, because the moon's far away as far as we human. The moon is as far as you can go, as far as humans have gone so far, and they went there right after the murders on Lake Herman Road, didn't they? Okay, and again, that was a point that the Zodiacs were making. Anyway, um, so the Donna Lass abduction and murder is something of a departure for the Zodiacs in the sense that it's a separate uh, it's a separate artifact, obviously, from what they were doing in the San Francisco Bay Area. But they used Donna Lass from 1222. Let me see how we. Okay, we're 1215 or 215. Okay, that's good. Um, they used Donna Lass from a 1223 location and from a pi location of the border being a manifestation of pi, and pi converts again to an anagram of zodiac. Um, and they bury her at benchmark 54. So let me see. Is that what I have here? Yes. So Salem's here, and Donna Lass is buried basically basically across the street from a BM54. These are not exact locations, obviously, because they considered Portsmouth Square, the entire space of Portsmouth Square. It's another example of fudging. We have fudging up here. We have fudging with the words last Christmas and July 4th in the letters. We have some fudging here. In other words, Donna Lass's body was not buried at benchmark 54. It was buried in uh, I don't even know that's the closest open ground, but it is significant open ground, just as these specific areas are significantly named. Blue Rock Springs Park parking lot, gate number 10, turnout on Lake Herman Road, Washington and Cherry, BM 54, VABM 3849, and so forth. Okay, so that's what the idea was. And I think I've probably said enough about Donna Lass, but if I have more to say about her, again, I wish things had come to a head in time for Mary Pilker to get some satisfaction out of this. Um, you never know what to say to. As I said, I felt obligated because Tom was cooperating with me, and he's being a good guy. He is a good guy. Um, uh, to talk to Mary, and Mary was a great person. I'm sorry that she's not still with us. I'm sorry that she did not get some satisfaction, but maybe she did. Maybe she saw people like myself and Mike Morford and Tom Voigt and Zodiac researchers and said, at least there are people who care about my sister. So let's. I hope that in talking about the Zodiac project, which was this gigantic puzzle, that the people who died in the course of these events aren't forgotten. That we still care about it. As up in my attic, I have pictures of Donna Lass, which were taken by family members, and that's what ends up happening in a lot of these. In a lot of these investigations, you end up getting to know people who were involved in the case and who lost family members, unfortunately. And I'm not a gloomy person, I guess. I like having fun. I like poking fun at at hobbyists in particular. Uh, I had some Druser jokes I wanted to make. I can't remember what they are, but you know, I like having fun with even with some people who heckle me. I enjoy having fun with them, or not with them, but at them. And so, but that's just a normal human reflex. I mean, even in times of war, I mean, people still uh, turn to humor because it's a diversion. It's kind of a way out of, because otherwise you wouldn't be at your best if you were just constantly thinking about how horrible it is. And the fact is, people are interested in the Zodiac killer case because it's not Gary Ridgway. It's not the Golden State Killer. The most interesting thing about Joseph James D'Angelo is the way he was caught. Okay, the way he was caught is absolutely fascinating. The fact that researchers went to the trouble of doing genetic genealogy, and if you had told this to people, to police 50 years ago, they would have like smirked at you and said, what are you talking about? You know, certainly if you had talked to the police who were investigating Jack the Ripper, they maybe the cops in the 50s and 60s, because you had the DNA molecule at least had been modeled by that time. And you know, the two guys who came up with the double helix got Nobel prizes and so forth. But certainly, if you went back to Victorian times and you went back to the Jack the Ripper case and told them, you know, someday you will be able to figure out who a killer was, somebody like a John Sipos, who broke in and very viciously broke the jaw of and raped and murdered Mary Scott. And they were able to find him on the other side of the country because his DNA was left at the crime scene. That would sound like magic to, you know, it's, I think, I don't know if it was Enrico Fermi or if it was Isaac Newton, or somebody said, some famous scientist said that any advance in science would look like magic to people who are earlier, you know, along the line. And you know, things like the James Webb telescope, what it can do, would probably you know, render the people who designed the Hubble space telescope, would probably render them speechless. So, um, all of this is part of the of dealing with what I think, without any doubt, is the single most complex serial murder case. Although I wouldn't say that the Zodiac Project was exactly serial murder. I'm not sure what it was. It was an art project, or maybe it was an art project gone wrong. That's what I would say. But anyway, let me just look really. Where are we now? We're almost at, wow, getting close to 2:30. Okay, this is going to take forever to upload. By the way, that's the longer your video is, the longer it takes to upload to YouTube. So this is going to take me well into the wee hours of the morning. The other thing that I've noticed is that people seem more interested in the common subjects of the Zodiac case. They were more interested in Lake Herman Road than they were in any of the other venues. They seem to be more interested in you know, the more familiar victims than they are you know, people like Shelley Humbo and Robert Salem. So it'll be interesting to see how popular this video is. But anyway, anyway, that's as much as I have to say about Don. Maybe I'll do that dragon and dragon and pumpkin thing in greater detail next time. I don't remember what the other factor was for the other factor in each case was reducible. But the 2521 is a prime number and it can't be reduced. I thought that was significant. I also think, and Dave Aranchek's comment was, I think he said, coincidences are fun to find. Okay, well, three words that are closely associated: pumpkin, dragon, and, well, maybe fascism isn't, but three words like that where you find, getting some moths around here, where you find where you find the same prime factor in three words. That doesn't seem like it's a coincidence to me, but maybe it is. Who knows? Maybe Dave's right and I'm wrong. What are the chances of that, though? You know. Anyway, okay. I want to thank everybody and the flying insects for coming by during this video, and thanks for watching if you're still watching, and I will come back. I'm not sure what my next video is going to be because I've gone through. Who's after? Well, yeah, Joan Webster, I guess. But that's the next big thing. I've spoken about that already. I was going to do a video with somebody else about Joan Webster, but now I can do one all by myself. So anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I will talk to you soon.